Picture a hole in the ground, not a comfortable hole, not a hole anyone chose, a hole that was dug by exhausted men using entrenching tools in the dark while other men tried to kill them. A hole that has been rained on and shelled and flooded and dug out again and flooded again until the walls weep mud and the floor never fully dries. A hole that smells like wet chalk and rotting wood and unwashed bodies, and something else underneath all of that. Something sweet and wrong that you learn very quickly not to think about too hard. Now fill that hole with 200,000 men. Add lice, add rats the size of cats, bold enough to sit on your face while you sleep. Add the sound of artillery that never fully stops. Not for days, not for weeks, that works itself into your skull until silence itself feels like a warning. Add cold that comes up through the mud and into your bones and stays there. Cold that you carry with you into your dreams. That's the Western Front in 1916. Approximately 400 miles of trenches stretching from the Belgian coast to the Swiss border. The most sophisticated system of organised killing the world had ever produced. And inside it, living in the mud, sleeping in shifts, eating bully beef out of tins with their fingers, men. Just men. Men from Yorkshire and Lancashire and Glasgow and Dublin. Men from farms, factories and counting houses. Men who had never been more than 20 miles from where they were born, now standing in Belgian mud, trying to remember what it felt like to be warm. And some of those men, more than anyone would count, more than anyone would admit, far more than the official records would ever show, were in love. Not with the war. God, not with the war. With each other. This is their story. Or rather, it's yours. Because tonight, you're going to live it. Not as a historian. Not as someone looking at photographs in a book. As a man in the mud, 20 years old, from a village in the West Riding of Yorkshire, who arrived at the front in the autumn of 1916 with 83 other men from his recruiting district, and who is about to discover something about himself that the world around him has no adequate language for, something that could get him killed, something he cannot stop. So, get comfortable, or as comfortable as you can manage. Here we go. Your name is Thomas Whitfield. Everyone calls you Tom. You are 20 years old and 4 months, and you have been in France for 11 days, and you have not slept properly in any of them. The smell is the first thing. It always is. It hit you when you were still a mile back from the front line, moving up through the communication trenches in the dark, and you thought at first it was something dead in the field nearby. An animal, maybe. But the smell didn't go away. It got thicker, more layered. By the time your section reached the reserve trench, you understood that the smell was the front. The front smells like this. All the time. There is no wind direction that makes it better. You're lying on a fire step in a section of trench called Piccadilly, which is not even remotely funny as a name, though someone clearly thought it was. Above you, about 2 feet of sandbag parapet, then open air, then no man's land, then the German lines. The German lines are approximately 140 yards away, which is about the length of a cricket pitch and a half, which is nothing, which is so close you can sometimes hear them talking when the guns stop long enough for voices to carry. Your back hurts. Your feet are wet. They have been wet since Tuesday. It is now Saturday, or possibly Friday. You have lost half a day somewhere in the tunnel of exhaustion that living here creates, where time goes strange and clocks stop meaning what they're supposed to mean. You try to close your eyes. They open again almost immediately. The sound of artillery has been going on so long that it's stopped being individual explosions and become a kind of weather. a storm that doesn't move. Far enough away right now that the shells are someone else's problem, but close enough that you feel each impact as a faint tremor through the mud wall at your back. The trench is narrow, maybe 6 feet wide at the top, less than that in most places. The walls are reinforced with timber and corrugated iron and sandbags that leak their sand through slow tears like they're bleeding. The floor is duckboards, wooden slats raised above the mud, but the mud finds its way through the gaps anyway. It always does. The mud on the Western Front is a living thing. It has opinions. It wants you. 3 feet to your right, a man is snoring. His name is Private Arthur Cayley, and he is 23 years old and comes from Bradford. And before the war, he drove a delivery cart for a grocer's, and his snoring is something to which you've been unable to become accustomed in 11 days. 3 feet to your left, there is a gap where the duckboards don't quite meet, and through that gap the mud has worked its way up to just below ankle level, and if you step in it in the dark, you go in past the knee. You found this out on your second night. Your left boot has never completely dried since, and beyond the gap, beyond the slight curve of the trench where it bends around a damaged traverse, lying with his cap over his face and his hands folded on his chest like he's been buried badly, is Private Edward Carver. Ned. You're not thinking about Ned. You're attempting to sleep. Your eyes open again. The fire step is made of mud packed against the forward wall of the trench and reinforced with sandbags. During stand 2 at dawn and dusk you climb up on it and look through a periscope or over the parapet and watch no man's land for movement. The rest of the time it serves as a bench, a bed, a table, a place to sit and stare at the opposite trench wall and try to remember what grass looks like when it isn't brown. You shift your weight. The fire step is not soft. The fire step is never soft. You have a ground sheet and your greatcoat pulled over you, and underneath, your uniform which has not been off your body in 6 days, and underneath that the particular layer of intimacy that comes from wearing clothes so long they start to feel like skin. You don't smell good. Nobody smells good. You stopped noticing your own smell after day 3 and everyone else's smell after day 5, and now the whole world smells of the front, and the front smells of this, and you have simply absorbed it into yourself like something unavoidable, like gravity. Somewhere down the trench line, a rat runs across a piece of corrugated iron and the sound is absurdly loud. Like a small person in boots. Arthur Cayley keeps snoring. You turn your head to the left, toward the bend in the trench, and you can see the rough shape of Ned Carver's boots in the darkness. He has big feet, size 10 boots. They stick up at an angle because he is tall enough that lying on a fire step means his feet hang off the end. You know this because you've been on fire step duty beside him twice, and both times his feet in their caked boots were at approximately the level of your shoulder, and both times he apologised for this in the particular way he apologises for things, which is quietly and without making a performance of it. You're not thinking about Ned Carver. You're going to sleep. You close your eyes. You came into this section 4 days after Ned did, which means he already knows things you don't. He knows which sergeant is worth listening to and which one is performing for his own benefit. He knows that the water in the forward section tastes of chalk no matter how long you leave it in the bottle, but the water from the pump 3 traverses back is almost drinkable. He knows that the rats in this section are bolder than average and will take food from your haversack if you don't hang it on the wire. He knows not to stand near the broken section of parapet at the northeast bend because there's a German sniper who has zeroed in on it, and 3 men from the previous company found this out in the first week. He told you all of this on the first day you arrived, standing in the mud looking like someone had dropped you from a height, which is what it felt like. He just came and stood next to you and started telling you things, not in a show-off way, in the way you tell someone useful things because it would be wasteful not to. His voice is lower than you expected for his face, which is narrow and long-jawed and young-looking, younger than 22, which is what he is. He speaks quietly, which you initially thought was caution, and later understood was just how he speaks. He moves the same way, carefully, economically, like someone who has thought about where he is going before he sets off. You need to sleep. Dawn Stand 2 is in approximately 4 hours, and you will spend the entire day useless if you don't get at least 3 hours before then. You close your eyes again. The mud smell wraps around you. It's a deep smell, a geological smell, like the earth itself is digesting something. On top of that, the chemical bite of cordite from the evening's shelling. Faint now, but still present, a metallic ghost in the back of your throat. Underneath, the biological warmth of 200 men living on top of each other, something almost sweet, almost suffocating. And underneath that, you have recently started noticing this and you're not sure what to do with the noticing. The faint, specific smell of Ned Carver's jacket when he stood close to you this afternoon to show you the right way to hold a periscope without getting your head blown off by a sniper who sees the reflection. Machine oil, mostly. Damp wool. Something else underneath. Warm and personal and entirely him. You open your eyes. This is the thing about the trenches that nobody tells you before you get here. Nobody warns you about the closeness, not the closeness of death, that you expected or thought you had. The closeness of other bodies. The constant physical proximity of men who are, outside of this, strangers. You eat with them, sleep with them, share blankets for warmth when the temperature drops below freezing, and there are not enough of either. You know the sounds each of them makes before they're fully awake, the particular way each one breathes, the shape each one makes in the dark. This closeness is normal here. It is expected. It is, in fact, encouraged. The British Army runs on the theory that men fight harder for the men they know, the men beside them, their section, their platoon, their battalion. The intensity of attachment is by design. It is supposed to make you more lethal. Nobody mentions what happens when that intensity becomes something else. Nobody mentions it, because there is no language for it that doesn't end with a court-martial. Your heart is beating at a rate that has nothing to do with artillery. You need to sleep. In the morning, if morning is the right word for the grey, bruised light that arrives each day like an apology, the routine begins again. Stand to at first light. Every man on the fire step, rifle in hand, watching no man's land. This is when attacks are most likely, the military minds have decided. Dawn and dusk, the threshold hours. Nothing happens at stand to most mornings. You stand there in the cold grey light and watch the torn ground between the lines, and it watches you back, and nothing moves. Once, a hare ran across no man's land at dawn, and every man in the section watched it in silence until it disappeared into the German wire, and for a moment the whole section felt like it had a single shared soul. All of them watching the same hare as if it were carrying something important. Stand down. Tea. If the tea ration has come up with the rations cart from the transport lines, thick and already sweetened with tinned milk, in a container that has usually been sitting against a warm body for the last mile to keep it from going stone cold. If the rations cart is late, or caught in the wrong stretch of communication trench when a shell lands near enough to disrupt everything, then there is no tea. There is just the grey morning and the smell and the work of the day which is constant and never finished. The trenches have to be maintained. They fall apart. The walls slump. The floor floods. The sandbags rot and need replacing. Wooden supports give way and have to be shored up with whatever materials can be scavenged. There are always duck boards to be repositioned, always a section of parapet that has been damaged by a shell and needs repair, always something that should be done before the day is out and definitely won't be. You learn to work with a rhythm that has nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with the simple fact that your hands keep moving or they seize up from the cold. The clay is thick and heavy, packed with chalk and stone. A full sandbag weighs about 40 pounds. You've filled thousands of them by now. Your shoulders ache in ways you have no vocabulary for. Your hands have developed a particular type of soreness along the inner edge of the palm where the handle of the entrenching tool sits, a soreness that fades slightly during the day and returns fully each morning, faithful as a habit. Ned works 2 positions over from you this morning, patching a section of revetting that has come away from the trench wall overnight. You can hear him working. The methodical sounds of hammer and stake, the grunt of effort when the stake doesn't want to go in, the particular way he swears under his breath, which is not dramatically but accurately, as if he's filing a precise complaint with the universe. You keep your eyes on your own work. The section you're in is managed by Corporal James Finch, who is 26 and treats his authority with the exhausted seriousness of a man carrying something heavy on a long road. He doesn't shout much. He doesn't need to. He has the quality that good NCOs develop under pressure, which is a kind of calmness that communicates itself through the body without any particular effort. When Finch is unworried, the section tends toward being unworried. When Finch gets quiet in a particular way, everyone pays attention. He is quiet now in the ordinary way, moving along the trench and checking the work, and when he gets to Ned's section, he stops and looks at the repair and says nothing, which Ned correctly interprets as approval. Whitfield, this is Finch, now at your position. That sandbag's going to go again in a week. I know, we're out of the right gauge wire. There's wire at C Company's stores. Private Carver knows where. You don't look up from the sandbag you're retying. Right. Send him with you after midday rations. You say nothing. Your hands keep working. This is how things happen here. Small logistics. Supply runs. 2 men sent together through the communication trenches to some other section's stores to beg or borrow what their own stores have run out of. 2 men walking through the narrow mud corridors with their heads down, navigating the zigzag structure that prevents a single shell blast from travelling the full length of the line. 2 men talking or not talking, as the case may be, entirely unobserved. There is no significance to any of this. You're simply working. The midday ration is bully beef, canned corned beef, a deep brownish red with a gelatinous quality when cold that makes it hard to eat without looking at something else, and hardtack biscuits so dense you can break a tooth on them if you're not careful. There was bread yesterday, which was a luxury which won't be repeated for several days. The bread comes up from the field bakeries and doesn't always survive the journey. You eat sitting on the fire step with your back against the trench wall and your knees pulled up, which is the only position that allows you to hold a tin in one hand and eat with the other. Ned sits down next to you without asking, which he's been doing since your 3rd day. as if the space beside you has become his space through some unspoken agreement. He's got a letter from home. He reads it while he eats, holding it in the hand that isn't managing his fork, which he does have, because he's the kind of man who thought to bring a fork. You didn't bring a fork. You've been eating with the lid of your tin, bent into a rough spoon shape. This too Ned noticed on day 3 and didn't comment on. But the next morning there was an extra fork lying on your kit, and when you looked at him he was looking somewhere else. Family, you ask? Sister? He folds the letter carefully. He always folds letters carefully, like they might be needed again in their exact original shape. She's working at the munitions factory in Leeds now. Says the money's better than anything she had before. Good money in shells? Apparently. He's quiet for a moment. She says the women doing the TNT work have gone yellow from the chemicals. Their skin turns yellow. You think about this. Women in a factory in Leeds with yellow skin making shells. The shells that end up here. The chain of it. Do they know before they take the job? I don't think anyone tells them. There's a rat watching you from the opposite end of the fire step. A big one, grey and unafraid, sitting up on its haunches with its dark eyes and its long, flexible nose working at the smell of your bully beef. Ned picks up a small stone and throws it. Not hard, just enough. The rat retreats 6 inches and sits down again. Cheeky bastard, you say. That one's been here longer than either of us, Ned says. He sounds almost respectful. I've been watching him. He knows exactly where the safe spots are, exactly which men will throw things and which ones won't bother. And which are we? Ned looks at you briefly. He has a direct way of looking at people that you find simultaneously difficult to hold and impossible to look away from. His eyes are a colour that's hard to name in the grey trench light, somewhere between green and brown and something else. He's already figured that out, Ned says. He came and sat right next to you on day 2. You had not known that. You feel obscurely pleased about it, which makes no sense. You are pleased that a rat has made a judgment about your character. But here in the trenches your reference points for what makes sense have shifted considerably. The rat, as if aware it's being discussed, sits up straighter. Come on, Ned says, folding the letter back into his breast pocket. Finch wants us at C Company's stores before they close the trench for afternoon inspection. He stands up, and you stand up, and together you move off through the trench. The communication trenches are dug at angles, zigzag, chicane, never a straight run so that no single shell blast can travel the whole length of the line and take out everyone in it. This means navigation is constant. Every communication trench looks like every other communication trench. Chalk walls, timber supports, the same wet smell, the same narrow floor with its duckboards and its unavoidable mud. You learn to navigate by memory and by the small signs. A piece of coloured rag tied to a stake, a name stencilled on a board, the particular angle of a support timber. Ned navigates without consulting any of the signs. He knows the route already. You follow slightly behind him, because the trench is just wide enough for one man to walk without turning sideways, but not wide enough for 2. And from behind you can see the set of his shoulders, and the way his tin hat sits slightly too far forward on his head, which it does because his neck is long and the hat is the standard issue size, which is wrong for him. How long were you back in England before they sent you out, you ask? 6 weeks after training. He doesn't look back. You? 8 weeks. I had an extra course on the Lewis gun. Are you any good at it? Adequate. You pause. I'm better with the rifle. I know, he says. I watched you at the range last week. You hadn't known he was watching. The C Company stores are in a dugout off the main communication trench, down 4 steps into a low room reinforced with heavy timbers and smelling aggressively of paraffin and damp canvas. A corporal named Whitmore manages the stores, a small man with glasses mended with wire who treats each request for supplies as a personal affront. Wire? He says it back at you like it's an unreasonable request. What gauge? 14 gauge. Haven't got 14. 16 would do. Got 16. Requisition form? Ned produces the requisition form. Finch gave it to him because Finch gave Ned the form, not you, which tells you something about Finch's assessment of who is better at paperwork. Whitmore looks at the form for a period of time that seems designed to communicate how busy he is, then disappears into the back of the dugout. Does he do this with everyone? You ask quietly. Apparently he's worse with the officers, Ned says. He made a captain from B Company wait 40 minutes for a tin of boot blacking. And the captain let him. The captain couldn't exactly shout at him in a way that would carry to the rest of the trench. There is something in the logic of the trenches that levels things in unexpected ways. A store corporal with the right supplies in sufficient demand becomes a kind of power. Everyone needs what he has. This is understood. Whitmore returns with a coil of wire and sets it on the counter, a plank of wood over 2 stacked ammo boxes, and Ned signs for it, and you each take a handle of the coil and carry it between you back through the communication trenches. Carrying things together at hip level through a narrow trench means walking close, closer than normal. The coil of wire is heavy enough that it has to be carried with both hands, which means your hands are both on the same object, several inches apart, the wire pulling slightly between you. You walk, you don't talk. The trench turns left and then right and then left again. Somewhere above the parapet level, a machine gun starts up in the middle distance. Not close, not theirs, just the constant background noise of the front doing its business. Your right hand is 6 inches from Ned's left hand on the wire coil. 6 inches. You have carried wounded men in those same communication trenches and touched strangers in the ordinary press of bodies and had no particular thought about it. The trenches are full of touch. You sleep against men, walk shoulder to shoulder with men, press yourself into men at the sound of incoming shells because there is simply nowhere else to go. Touch here is functional, necessary, unremarkable. This feels different. You do not examine this feeling. You carry the wire. You deliver it to Finch, who takes it with a nod and says good work in the way he says things, which is quietly and as a statement of fact rather than encouragement. And that is the end of the afternoon, and the afternoon gives way to evening, and evening means stand to again the dust patrol, everyone on the fire step watching the light drain out of the sky over no man's land. The light at dusk on the Western Front has a quality you haven't been able to fully account for. It's a grey-gold light, usually, filtered through smoke and chalk dust and the particular atmospheric conditions of a region where thousands of shells have been burning their contents into the air for 2 years. In that light, everything looks slightly unreal. The torn ground of no man's land looks like a painting of itself. The wire catches the last of it and throws tiny orange sparks. The silhouettes of men on the fire step look like cutouts. Ned is 2 positions to your left at stand to. You can see him in profile, his tin hat and the long line of his jaw and his hands on his rifle. He is very still. He has that quality of stillness that some people carry naturally, where they don't fidget, don't shift their weight, don't do the small, unnecessary movements that most people fill their standing time with. He simply stands. You watch no man's land. Stand down comes without incident. The night settles in. In the dugout, a deeper room off the main trench, reinforced with heavy timbers, low-ceilinged, candle-lit. The section the wizened on watch tries to sleep. 6 men in a space roughly 12 feet by 8. 3 plank and canvas bunks along one wall, a table in the centre that's really just a door laid across 2 supports, candles in bottles, a small brazier that generates enough heat to make the air thick and smoky, but not enough to make anyone actually warm. The brazier is the point of civilization in the dugout. Everyone understands this. You sit as close to it as possible while it's burning, and when it gutters down you feed it another piece of charcoal from the bag, and when the charcoal runs out you burn whatever wood is available, and when there's no wood you put on your greatcoat and hope for sleep. Tonight there's still charcoal. You're sitting on an ammunition box near the brazier with your hands held toward the heat, which is small and orange and impractical but present. And Ned is sitting on the other side of it, doing the same. The other men are asleep. Arthur Keeley is snoring again, a long soaring sound. Private Sykes has pulled his greatcoat completely over his head and is visible only as a shapeless form in the lower bunk. Privates Hargreaves and Jenkinson are in the far corner, both unconscious. Hargreaves with his mouth open in a way that looks uncomfortable. The candle on the table has burned down to a stub and throws very little light. The brazier's glow is the main illumination. You and Ned are both orange in it, and the shadows move when the coals shift. Ned is writing something in a small notebook. He does this most evenings. You don't know what he writes, and you haven't asked, because you understand that the notebook is private, in the particular way that very few things are private here. You've left the question alone, and he hasn't offered. The guns are quieter tonight. Not absent. They are never absent, but reduced to a low, intermittent grumble somewhere in the north, distant enough that each impact is a suggestion rather than a fact. Do you ever get used to it, you ask? You don't specify what. He doesn't ask you to. The noise? Any of it. He thinks about this seriously. The way he thinks about things. He doesn't give quick answers to questions that aren't quick questions. You get used to some of it, he says finally. The sound of different shells. Which ones to run from and which ones to stand for, that becomes automatic. He pauses, closes the notebook, which he does with 2 hands carefully. The rest of it. I don't think you're supposed to get used to the rest of it. Finch seems used to it. Finch seems like himself regardless. That's different. You think about this. He was at Lou's before this posting. He doesn't talk about it. No, Ned agrees, he doesn't. A silence. The coals shift and settle. The light flickers. What was it like? Ned asks. Before? And you understand he means before France. Before the war. Home? Small. I grew up outside Skipton. My father runs a hardware business. Nails, tools, that sort of thing. You pause. Unremarkable. That's not a bad thing. No, it isn't. You look at the coals. It just seems very far away. Everything does, he says. I try sometimes to remember what it felt like to not be here, and I can't quite, like it happened to someone else. This is something you have not heard articulated before, though you have felt it. The way the front colonizes your sense of reality, makes itself the only reality, pushes everything prior to the margins until it almost stops being real. You came to France 11 days ago from a life that has been ongoing for 20 years, and those 20 years are becoming a story you know but can't quite locate inside your own body. Where did you grow up, you ask? Lincoln. My father's a solicitor. He says this without embarrassment or pride, just as information. I read mathematics at Oxford for a year before the recruiting office opened. Didn't finish the year. A mathematics student. You look at him with this new fact and see how it fits. The economy of his movements, the way he thinks before he speaks, the particular quality of his attention. Do you miss it? University? He's quiet for a moment. The candlelight is dying and the brazier light is what remains, and in that reddish-orange glow his face is very still. I miss what I thought I would become, he says, which isn't quite the same thing. You don't ask what he thought he would become, because you understand that some answers are private in exactly the way the notebook is private, and you have learned to respect that boundary. You also understand, in a way you have not yet found words for, that what he just said to you is something he would not say to most people. That the saying of it was a form of trust. The candle dies. Better get some sleep, you say. Yes, he agrees. You both get up, and in the dark of the dugout you navigate to your bunks by memory. 2 steps left, 1 step forward, the edge of the middle bunk at hip height, and you lie down on the canvas and pull your greatcoat over you, and the sounds of the dugout close around you. Keely's snoring, the distant guns, the occasional scratch of a rat somewhere in the walls, and you lie there and you do not sleep, and you listen to Ned settling into his bunk above you, the small sounds of a person making themselves as comfortable as a canvas bunk allows. And after a while those sounds stop, and you listen to him breathe. This is not something you would be able to explain to anyone, including yourself. You are listening to a man breathe. This is all that is happening. This is the entirety of what is happening. But it is steady, and it is there, and it is him. And after a while, much longer after a while than any of the previous 11 nights, you finally sleep. You've been in France for 3 weeks when you first understand that you're not the only one. The understanding comes through a door. A real door. A plank of wood hung on leather hinges over the entrance to a dugout in the reserve trench, the officers' company HQ, which you pass on your way back from carrying a message to the lieutenant. The door is ajar, the voices are low. You catch only fragments, passing. There is no reason to slow down, to linger. You're carrying an empty message pouch back to Finch, but fragments are enough. One voice. A quality in it that has nothing to do with the words, something careful and particular, and addressed to one specific person in a way that ordinary voices don't address anyone. And then the other voice, responding in kind. You don't slow down. You walk at exactly your regular pace. You round the corner and you don't look back. But something has shifted in the way you understand the world. Because if those two, who you now know are 2 specific men with specific names and specific histories, men who would be committing a criminal offence under Section 11 of the Criminal Law Amendment Act, if anyone chose to make it so, men whose careers and freedom and lives depend on no one looking too carefully at what they are. If those 2 have found a way, here, in this, then the thing you've been not examining is something that exists in the world. Concretely. Actually. You carry the empty message pouch back to Finch and hand it over and go back to your fire step, and you stand there and you look at no man's land. The world looks the same. The wire, the torn ground, the grey sky above. Everything looks the same. You are not the same. The mechanism of hiding that queer men have developed by 1916 is, if you can stomach the irony of it, fairly elegant. It has been refined by decades of necessity, by the particular pressure that comes from a society that has made you illegal, that has put men in prison for what they are, That has created the specific brutality of public exposure. Oscar Wilde died 15 years ago in a Paris hotel room, broken by the machine that destroyed him, and every man who is what you are knows his name, knows what the machine can do. But the trenches have created something unintentional, an accident of policy and circumstance that has accidentally given you cover. Here is the thing about the British Army's culture of masculine friendship. It is intense, it is physical, it is explicitly encouraged, and it has no effective upper limit. Men who love each other, the approved official version, are better soldiers. This is the theory. The army knows it. They've built their entire small unit structure around it. Your section is your family. Your platoon is your larger family. You fight for these men. You suffer for these men. You die for these men. And this is both calculated and genuine. The attachment is real even when it's engineered. Which means that within this structure, men can love each other. In every sense. In most senses. And because the approved version exists and is everywhere visible and is in fact demanded of you, the other version, the criminal version, the private version, can shelter within it like a sparrow in a cathedral. Two men who are always together, this is normal. They are chums, they are pals. This is the language of the whole enterprise. Two men who prefer each other's company, who choose each other for work details, who sit together at meals, who are on each other's watches. This is exactly what the army wants. This is unit cohesion. This is fighting spirit. You understand this with a clarity that is almost like relief. Almost. Because the shelter only works if no one looks too closely. And if someone does look too closely, if someone has a reason to look, if the touch lingers half a second too long, if the look holds half a second too long, if someone sees something they decide to report, then the shelter vanishes, and what's left is exposure. Court-martial, imprisonment, dishonourable discharge, the full apparatus of official disgust. And this particular apparatus, unlike the shells and the gas and the snipers, is made specifically for men like you. It knows what to look for. So you learn to look at the world in two ways simultaneously. The surface way, which is everything anyone can see. Tom Whitfield and Ned Carver, two privates in the same section, who get on well and work well together, and are often sent on supply runs because Finch has assessed them as reliable. This is the visible world. This is the world that exists in any record. And then the other world, which exists in the space between people, in the half-second looks and the distances kept deliberately ordinary, in the exact calibration of what is allowed and what would give you away. This is a world that requires tremendous attention. Attention that you give now automatically in the way you give attention to incoming shells, not consciously at first, and then so deeply it becomes part of how you breathe. The fourth week, there's a gas attack. You've been through one before, just in your second week. This one is more serious. The wind has shifted in the German line's favour. The gas hangs in the low ground, drifts toward your section, and the alarm is 6 sandbags banged together in a sequence you will hear in your sleep for the rest of your life. Respirator on. This is practice, and practice, and practice again, until your hands do it without your mind's involvement. Tin box off the belt. Cotton waste and chemicals, the strange chemical smell of the respirator itself mixing with the chemical smell of the gas, which is different. Phosgene this time, which smells improbably and terribly faintly of cut grass. Cut grass. You grew up in the West, riding of Yorkshire, in a village where the fields around it smell of cut grass in late summer, And now that smell means run, means gas, means check your respirator seal, because if you breathe this, you will drown in your own fluids. You stand on the fire step in your respirator and watch through the eyepieces and breathe the chemical air and wait. After the attack in the dugout, Ned comes to find you. You don't know exactly when you're being found by him. Became something that happens automatically, that you wait for without having decided to wait for it. But he is here, and his respirator is off, and there is gas residue on the arms of his jacket. "All right?" he asks. "Yes, you?" "Fine." He sits down on the ammunition box, his ammunition box, because that too has become his, and looks at his hands. They are shaking slightly, the tremor that comes after, the deferred physiological response to adrenaline that the body produces when you don't actually need it anymore. You have the same tremor. You sit next to him, close, because the dugout has people coming and going, and nobody is paying attention to where anyone else is sitting, and you're just two men sitting close to the brazier, which is the closest thing to warmth available. His shoulder is against yours, jacket to jacket, the rough wool, the weight of him. Neither of you moves away. "The gas smell," you say quietly to the space in front of you. "Vosgene smells like hay," he says, "or cut grass. I know." He pauses. "My grandfather's farm, outside Lincoln. I used to spend summers there." "It's wrong," you say, "that it should smell like that." "Yes," he agrees. "It's very wrong." His shoulder against yours. Not moving. 5 minutes, maybe 10, while the dugout goes about its business around you and nobody pays any particular attention. Then Finch comes in, and the moment disperses into logistics, into the business of checking the section, into the next thing and the next thing. But for 5 minutes, or 10, his shoulder against yours. That was real. That happened. You carry it with you like the coal residue in your hands, like the gas smell in your clothes. You carry it with you into the evening, into Stand 2, into the long grey dusk over no man's land. There is a word, and you know this word. You have always known this word in the oblique angled way that boys in England know things that nobody tells them directly. There is a word for what you are. It is a medical word, a clinical word. It is also a legal word. There are several other words, all of them worse, all of them intended to cut. The word you have found for yourself in the privacy of your own mind is simply the truth. You are a man who is in love with another man. This is a fact, stated as a fact, without the decoration of catastrophe that other people would paint it with. You're in love with Ned Carver. You have been, you think, since the second day, when he stood next to you in the mud and told you things you needed to know in a voice that has been living in your head like a song ever since. You've been in love with him through the supply runs and the fire steps and the dugout evenings and the gas attack. And you will be in love with him, you think, for as long as you know where he is. This is the truth. You're not confused about it. You're not in denial about it. You are, in the vocabulary available to you in 1916 in the British Expeditionary Force, a man who is in love, and the man he is in love with is 3 feet away in the bunk above him, and the world you live in has made this the most dangerous thing imaginable. But it is still true. The night after the gas attack, Ned comes off watch at 2 a.m. and finds you still awake on your bunk. This is unusual. You've been sleeping better recently. The specific exhaustion of trench work driving you under most nights whether you want to go or not. But tonight the gas smell is still in your clothes, and you can't stop your brain from running the same sequence. The alarm, the respirator, the green-yellow tinge at the parapet level, the smell of cut grass that means death. Can't sleep? He asks, low, not to wake the others. No. He stands at the foot of the bunk for a moment. In the dark you can only see his outline, the shape of his tin hat before he takes it off and hangs it, the long line of him, his hands. Move over, he says. You move over. He lies down next to you on top of the greatcoat, and you are both on your sides facing the same direction, and his chest is at your back, and this is the calculation, the instant calculation you run. Is this something that happens? And the answer, which you know because you have been watching for 3 weeks, is yes. Men sleep together here for warmth, for comfort, for all the pragmatic reasons that cold and fear and exhaustion produce. Finch has slept back to back with Hargreaves on the coldest nights. Keeley and Sykes share a bunk most of the time regardless. It is not unremarkable what Ned has just done. It is, in the approved vocabulary, exactly what soldiers do. But this is Ned, and his chest is at your back, and his breath is in your hair, and his arm, after a moment, comes around you, and you can feel his heartbeat, and it is faster than sleep. Neither of you moves, neither of you speaks. His heartbeat. I kept thinking, he says, so quietly it's almost not sound, about the grass smell. Me too. My grandfather's farm, he says. My grandfather used to take me out in the mornings before anyone else was up. We'd walk the fields. He'd show me things. How to tell which grain was ready by the feel of it. What the clouds meant for the weather. His voice is very quiet, and it has something in it that you haven't heard there before, which is rawness, something unguarded. It was just the two of us, very early. The whole field smelling of summer. That's a good memory, you say. I don't want it to smell like this, he says, and there is nothing to say to that, because he is right, and the gas has taken something from him, from both of you, which is the capacity to think of a certain smell without also thinking of death. And that is a genuine loss, and it cannot be given back. You put your hand over his arm, just your hand over his arm, nothing more than that. Neither of you moves for a long time. When you wake up at pre-dawn stand to, you're alone on the bunk. He's already at his fire step position, hat on, rifle in hand, as if nothing happened. As if the night was simply the night. You take your position. 2 steps over. You don't look at each other. This too is part of the language. The not looking. The careful ordinariness that follows the moments that were not ordinary. This is something you both understand without discussion, without negotiation, with the precise fluency of people who are both doing the same calculation at the same time. The skin lightens. Nothing comes across no man's land. Stand down. Tea. The language of the queer man in 1916 is made of omission. Of what isn't said, isn't written, isn't done in the visible world. You have probably met men before, at school, at home in the village, in the years between boyhood and this, who were what you are, and you didn't know it, and they didn't know you knew it, because the language is all omission, all absence, all negative space. In civilian life, this means a particular kind of loneliness, a life conducted in the spaces between legible things. In the trenches, the same mechanism takes a different shape, because here, omission is also the native language of survival. Nobody says what they're afraid of directly. Nobody says what they think about the men they've watched die, or the men who will die. Nobody says, I love this man beside me, in any direct way, even when they mean it in the approved and legal version. Everything important is encoded into action, into presence, into the shared cup of tea and the spare fork left on someone's kit. The trenches have made you fluent in a mission without meaning to. And in that fluency, there is a kind of freedom that civilian life doesn't offer. Out there, in the streets of Skipton or Leeds or Lincoln, the absence of language means absence of you. Here, the absence of language is the language. You speak it. Ned speaks it. And what passes between you in the space of not saying is, somehow, more substantial than speech. You are 32 days into France when the company gets 4 days out of the line. They call it rest, which is relative. You spend the first day actually resting, sleeping in the billet, a barn 3 miles back from the line, smelling of old straw and the animals that used to live in it, with a floor that is still mud but is a different mud, a mud that has not been shelled and does not contain what the mud at the front contains, sleeping for something like 12 hours, waking only to eat and use the latrine and go back to sleep. The second day, the platoon is put on various fatigues and drills because the army does not allow idleness even in rest. But the supervision is lighter and the evenings are free. The billet is 3 miles from a village with 2 cafes and a bar, and the men who have money, which is most of them since there's nothing to spend it on in the line, go to the village in groups. Keeley and Sykes and Hargreaves go together in search of the particular combination of cheap wine and a female company that the rest areas have become known for providing. Ned doesn't go. You go initially with the larger group as far as the edge of the village, and then you fall back, and after a while you're walking on a road that runs between fields in a direction that isn't the village, in the early evening light of a France that looks nothing like the trenches. Flat and agricultural, with actual crops in the fields, with birds making actual bird sounds, with silence that is the kind of silence that means the absence of sound rather than the absence of shells. Ned catches up with you at the second field. He doesn't explain why he's there. You don't ask. You walk together along the road. There are poplars at the edge of the field, tall and thin, their leaves moving in a light wind. The sky is the particular soft colour of a late summer evening in northern France, a colour that has no equivalent in Yorkshire, something between rose and silver. I'd forgotten fields, Ned says. I'd forgotten birds, you say. There's a wood pigeon somewhere nearby making its sound, which is absurdly peaceful after weeks of artillery. You both stop and listen to it. My grandfather would know what kind, he says. Can you find out? What happened to the farm? Still there. My uncle runs it now. Grandfather died 2 years ago. A pause. I was at Oxford when it happened. I got a letter. I'm sorry. He was 81. He'd had everything he wanted. He looks at the poplars. Except enough time in the fields, probably. There's never enough of that. You walk. The road bends slightly, following the edge of the field, and around the bend there's a section of it that's hidden from the billet by a rise in the ground, and from the village by a stand of trees, and here, in the particular quality of this hidden place, you stop, and he stops, and neither of you says anything for a moment. The light is failing. The poplars are dark shapes now. The wood pigeon has stopped. Tom, he says, just your name, just the one syllable, and you know, because you have been learning his language for 32 days, the language made of what isn't said, the language of exact calibration and careful omission. You know what he is saying with it. I know, you say. The gap between you closes. You're not sure who moves, possibly both. Your hand finds his arm the way it found his arm in the dugout, except now it's not dark, it's only just nearly dark, and the light is enough to see his face, which is looking at you in the direct way it always looks at things, except the quality of it now is something you have never had directed at you before, something that you will spend the rest of your life, however long that is, failing to adequately describe. You stand together at the side of a road in France in 1916 in the shadow of poplars, and the distance between you is nothing, and his forehead rests against yours, and that is all. That is everything. This is, he starts. I know what it is, you say. The risk. I know. His hands on your face, his thumbs at your jaw. Nothing that a court-martial could turn into anything. Here, in this road, in this growing dark, just two men standing close, foreheads together. But the quality of it, the quality of what is happening between you. I've known for weeks, he says quietly against your cheek. So have I. A moment. The fields, the poplars, the last light. All right, he says simply, as if something has been decided. All right. You agree. And then you're walking back side by side, your shoulders occasionally touching in the ordinary way that men's shoulders touch on a road that's not wide enough for two. And the evening star has appeared above the poplars, and the billet is a mile away, and you are the same people you were an hour ago, and completely different people. And neither of these things is in conflict with the other. In the billet that night, lying on your separate piles of straw, because in the billet there's room enough for separate piles and everything must look like everything, you lie awake and you think, I am the most careful I will ever have to be. Starting now, I am the most careful, and I have never felt less like being careful in my life. The rules establish themselves without being written down, the way the most important rules always do. You do not touch in the trench. In the trench, you are Private Whitfield and Private Carver, two men in the same section who work well together and are often paired for duties, and this is the entire visible story. Touch in the trench is functional. The hand on the shoulder that means move, the grip on the arm that means down, the instinctive press of bodies when a shell lands closer than expected. These touches are the grammar of survival and belong to everyone. Nothing you do in the trench belongs only to the two of you. You do not look at each other in ways that last too long. You have calibrated this so precisely over the weeks that it has become automatic, like the calibration of sound that tells you the difference between an outgoing and an incoming round. A glance is a glance, a look is a look. The difference is measured in fractions of a second, and you know the measurement by instinct now. Feel it in your body when you've held a moment half a beat too long, and pull back from it the way you'd pull back from the edge of a parapet. You do not speak differently to each other than you speak to anyone else. This is the one that costs most, actually, because the things you would say to him if you could are not dramatic things, not declarative things, not the kind of things that you could be overheard saying and have condemned for. They are small things, the specific small things that accumulate between two people when they know each other well enough that the knowing itself becomes a language. You swallow those things. You say instead, good work with the revetting, Carver. You say, Finch wants us at the stores again in the morning. You say nothing that would look like anything to anyone watching. And then there is the other register, the one that exists in the space between the rules, the way you both know, without arranging it, which evenings it's possible to walk away from the billet and find a road or a field or a stretch of open country where no one is watching. This doesn't happen in the line. In the line it's impossible. You are never more than 10 feet from another man awake, and the consequence of carelessness in the line is so complete and so immediate that the thought doesn't arise. But in rest, in the periods out of the line that come approximately every 3 weeks, brief and never guaranteed. Yes, those evenings are possible. Those evenings are the entire economy of what you have. You learn the grammar of them. The way he adjusts his cap by the door of the billet when he's going to take the left road rather than the right. The way you make a specific comment about the evening air when you mean you'll follow in 5 minutes. Small ciphers, built up from nothing, from the raw material of just watching each other, that no one around you would understand as anything other than two men talking about the weather. This is, you understand, how it has always been done. Not by you specifically. This is your first time in every sense, your first time knowing someone this way, and your first time being careful about it simultaneously, and the combination requires more of you than anything the army has asked so far. But by men like you in every time, in every set of circumstances, the whole edifice of hiding is not something you invented. It was built before you, and you have simply moved into it. The way you moved into the dugout, inheriting the structure someone else made, adding your own small repairs. The difference between you and every man who built that structure before you is the particular shape of the war around it. Because the war, which is trying to kill you both, has also accidentally given you a gift. The gift is this. Here, in this specific time and place, the kind of love that would be punished in peacetime is so thoroughly hidden inside the acceptable love that they are, for most practical purposes, indistinguishable. And the acceptable love, the love of men for the men beside them, the love that the army has engineered and encouraged and built its entire fighting spirit around, that love is so intense, so immediate, so undeniably real in the face of daily death, that it has permanently altered the social landscape of the section, the platoon, the entire front. Men hold each other here. Men weep for each other here. Men who have never said a personal thing to another man in their lives outside the family will say things in a dugout at 2 a.m, with the guns going and the candle burning down, that would have been unthinkable in a drawing room in England. The extremity of the situation produces extremity of feeling, and the extremity of feeling produces honesty. And in that honesty the landscape is broader than it would otherwise be. This is not safety. Safety is not available, but it is something. You write home every week. Your mother expects a letter on Sundays, and you write it on Saturdays when there's time, in the dugout by candle, on the paper from the supply of writing materials the section is issued, along with the rations and the rifle oil and the louse powder. The letters are censored. Finch reads them before they go back down the line. This is standard. You know it. You write accordingly. You tell your mother about the weather, which is always variable in ways the censors don't care about. You tell her about the food, in terms that are accurate but not alarming. The bully beef is fine. The tea is good when it arrives hot. You tell her that you're well, which is true most days. You tell her things about France that are interesting without being useful to the enemy. The quality of the light, the poplars, the sound of the village church bell that carries the billet on still evenings. You do not tell her about the gas. You do not tell her about the sniper at the northeast bend who has been responsible for 2 men in the section. You do not tell her that you are in love with a man from Lincoln who reads mathematics and knows the name of every grain by the feel of it, and whose heartbeat you have memorized. The letter you cannot write is much longer than the letter you can. You have begun, not quite consciously, to compose it in your head during the long watches on the fire step, when your eyes are on no man's land and your mind is free to go where it wants. It is not a letter you would ever send. It could not be sent. But composing it is something, a private act of existing fully in a place where full existence is not permitted. Dear mother, it begins in your head, in the dark. I am very well, which is true and also insufficient. I have met someone. This is all I am going to say about it, and you will understand or you won't, and I love you regardless. What I want you to know is that in the worst place I have ever been, I have found the best thing. I have found a person who makes the world around him legible, who makes silence communicative, who knows the difference between a question that wants an answer and a question that wants to be heard, who told me things I needed to know on the first day, not to impress me but because it would have been wasteful not to, and who has been telling me things I need to know ever since, in a language that doesn't require words. I don't know the correct word for what we are to each other. I have been informed by the law that what I am is criminal, and informed by the church that what I am is a sin, and informed by the general weight of opinion that what I am is shameful. But I am also informed by the feeling of his shoulder against mine in the dark, and by the particular silence he gives to things that deserve it, and by the way he folds letters carefully as if they might be needed again. I am informed by all of this that what I am is real, and that will have to be sufficient. It will have to be sufficient. You carry this letter with you on the fire step and in the supply runs and in the dugout evenings, and it changes slightly day by day as more things happen, and you never write it down, and it will never be sent, and it is the most honest thing about you. Ned's letters are different from yours. He writes to his sister mostly, and to his mother, and occasionally to someone at Oxford. A tutor, you think, or a friend, you're not sure which. His letters are longer than yours. He has more to say. He writes with the particular fluency of someone who has thought carefully, and then committed fully to the act of communication, and even the edited versions that go through Finch have a quality that makes Finch sometimes hold them a moment longer than the others before handing them back. What he writes to you is this: nothing. He writes to you nothing, because the writing to you is happening in the other register, in the cap adjustment and the small comment about the evening air and the way he finds you after hard days without being asked to. The writing to you happens in the body of each day, in the physical language you've both learned to speak. But once, in the 6th week, you find a small piece of paper folded inside your right boot, which you cannot imagine how he got into your boot without you noticing, and on it, in his careful handwriting, are 4 words. You still have them. Memorized, because you destroyed the paper immediately, burned it in the brazier with a piece of waste timber, watched it go to ash because you are careful. You are the most careful you've ever been. But the words are in your head, word-shaped and exact. The 4 words are, you are not alone. You stand at the brazier with the ash of the paper in the fire, and you stand there for longer than is probably advisable, until Kaylee comes in, and the moment disperses into the ordinary business of the evening, and you go to your bunk and you lie there, and the 4 words are in your head like the church bells of Skipton, like the sound of your name said in his voice. You are not alone. No, you are not. In late October, the section is attached to a working party that goes out into no man's land 3 nights in a row to repair the wire. This is not a popular duty. No man's land is, by definition, the place where things that kill you come from, and working in it in the dark with nothing but silence and wire cutters and a pair of gloves is an exercise in a particular kind of courage that is different from the courage of the fire step. The fire step is passive courage. You stand and you are shot at and you do not run. The working party is active courage. You go toward the thing that might kill you, and you do your job, and you come back if you're lucky. The wire needs constant maintenance because shells tear it, and nobody goes into no man's land during the day to repair it. 3 men from the section go each night. Ned is on the first and third nights. You are on the second and third. The night you go out together is the third night, the worst night, because by the third night the Germans have noticed the working party pattern and have begun sending up flares at intervals designed to catch you. You go out through the sally port, a small gap in the wire on your own side, at 11 at night. 3 of you, Ned, and a private named Mallory, who is from Manchester and has bad eyes but extremely steady hands, which is the ideal characteristic for wirework. You go on your hands and knees, which is the only safe way to move in no man's land, because any upright shape is a target, the ground. You've stood at the parapet and looked at no man's land with the periscope and understood abstractly what it is. But crawling through it at night is something else entirely. The ground is churned to something that isn't quite soil anymore, a mixture of chalk and clay and shell fragments and other things you don't examine closely. The smell here is the smell of the front distilled to its essence, every part of what the front is concentrated into the earth itself. Something rotting, something chemical, something that is purely the smell of 2 armies facing each other for 2 years and leaving in the ground everything that combat leaves. Your hands press into this earth with each movement forward. The chalk is cold and slightly damp, gritty under your palms. The shell fragments are everywhere, edges up, pressing through your gloves. You feel each one as a sharp point of pressure that doesn't quite break the skin, but lets you know it could. You move in silence. Complete silence is impossible. The wire you're carrying clinks faintly despite the wrapping, but you move in the kind of silence that is the maximum available. Breathing through your mouth to reduce any sound. Placing your hands and knees with deliberate care. Feeling for obstacles before your weight goes onto them. 10 yards out from your wire, 15 yards, 20. The German lines are about 120 yards away in this section. You're moving toward them. A flare goes up. The drill for this is stop. Do not move. Flatten yourself against the ground and do not move until the flare dies. You flatten. Ned flattens. Mallory flattens. The flare burns for 20 seconds, maybe 30. You cannot time it. You're pressed against the cold earth of no man's land with your face turned sideways, and the chemical smell of the ground in your nose and the flare's white light falling across you, and you are trying to be ground. You're trying to have the stillness and the colour and the texture of churned chalk and clay, to be continuous with it, to be uninteresting to any watching eye. The flare dies. Darkness returns, denser than before because your eyes had adjusted to the light. You lie in the dark. Your heart is in your throat. Your hands are flat on the cold ground, 10 degrees colder than the air, and you can feel every sharp edge of every shell fragment through your gloves. A hand finds yours in the dark. Ned's hand, his palm flat against the back of your hand, fingers closing around it briefly, so briefly, the fraction of a second that is the amount of time that might be a mistake, might be accidental, might mean nothing. The fraction of a second that is also, if you're not a man who is capable of that kind of ambiguity anymore, everything. You squeeze back once. His hand withdraws. You crawl forward to the wire. You spend 40 minutes in no man's land doing the work, and you do not speak and you do not touch again. And Mallory, who has been 2 yards to your left the entire time, has noticed nothing that is visible in Mallory's face when you go back through the sally port and return to the trench and Finch is there to meet you. Any contact? 2 flares from their side, Ned says. No movement. The wires patched to the 3rd marker. Finch nods. Good work. Get some sleep. And that is the whole of it documented. No contact. Wire patched. 3 men back safe. The rest of it. His hand on yours in no man's land, in the 30-second darkness of a dying flare, 10 yards from your own wire and 110 from theirs, lying flat against earth that is full of things that were people. The rest of it is not in any record. It is not anywhere except inside you and inside him, and it will stay there, exact and intact, for as long as you live, however long that is. You get through November. November on the Western Front is a specific category of suffering. The Somme campaign has been grinding on since July. You were not in the main assault. You came into the line afterward. You have been in a quieter section, relatively. And even this has been more than you previously understood the word hard to mean. But in November the mud deepens to something medieval. The water table here is high, and the clay holds water, and the shell damage to the land has destroyed whatever natural drainage there was, and the result is that the floor of the trench is now liquid in some sections, actually liquid, shin-deep in some places, and even the duckboards don't help because the duckboards are floating. Trench foot becomes the administrative emergency. Trench foot is what happens when your feet are wet long enough. The skin begins to break down. It swells. It turns red, then blue, then black in extreme cases. It is caused entirely by prolonged moisture and pressure, and the cure is dry socks and dry feet, which the Western Front in November is structurally incapable of providing. Finch checks everyone's feet daily. This is procedure now, official policy, because enough men have been lost to trench foot that command has decided to take it seriously. 3 times a day you're supposed to remove your boots and massage your feet and apply whale oil, which smells exactly as unpleasant as it sounds and which you have developed a deep personal hatred for, but which does actually work. Or works well enough that the men who use it are less likely to lose toes. You sit on the fire step with your boots off in November, rubbing whale oil into your feet, and this is not dignified, and it is cold, and your feet have the texture of something that has been in water too long, which they have, and none of this is anything you imagined when you joined up. Ned sits beside you doing the same thing, and you're both looking at your respective feet with expressions that, if you could see them, would be identical. A kind of resigned scientific attention, the attention of a man who is dealing with a practical problem and trying not to feel feelings about it. I had quite nice feet before this, he says. Had you? I think. I'm not sure I can tell any more. Arthur Keeley across the trench makes a sound that's to be a laugh. He's also doing his feet. Everyone is doing their feet. The fire step currently looks like a very specific kind of horror. 8 men in a line with their boots off in the mud, the November wind coming across no man's land and finding each pair of bare feet unerringly. In the history books, Ned says, they'll say, men fought the Great War in the mud, and that will be the whole of it. They won't mention the whale oil. They absolutely will not mention the whale oil. Keeley, now definitely laughing, drops his whale oil tin into the mud and says something that Finch pretends not to hear. This is the other thing about the trenches, the humour, which is specific and dark and entirely self-generated, which emerges not from anything funny about the situation, but from the gap between the situation and any reasonable expectation of what a human life should contain. The gap itself is funny, in a way that has nothing to do with happiness. The gap is a thing you look into together, and looking into it together with the right people is one of the ways you stay sane. Ned is one of the right people, has been since day one, when he told you where not to stand and why, in a voice that contained, even then, a faint frequency of shared absurdity, a sense of the gap. You put your boot back on and press your foot against the mud of the fire step and feel the cold come up through the sole, even through the oil and the sock and the leather, and you think, I am going to remember this. Not because it is good, because Ned is here, 4 inches to my left, putting his own boot back on with the same care and resignation, and the fact of his being here is the only warmth available, and I am choosing to register it. The week before Christmas, the section takes casualties. This is the phrase that dispatches use casualties, a word that contains within it the word casual, which is nothing like what the reality is. The reality is a shell that lands 20 yards from your position at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, during a period of what had been, up to that point, relative quiet. The reality is the specific sound of an incoming that you've learned to distinguish from outgoing, the particular frequency of air displacement that means it's coming your way. And then the ground lifting under your feet and the noise, which is not a bang but a pressure, a physical event that the body experiences as much as the ears, and then the debris, chalk and mud and timber falling back out of the air like rain. Hargreaves and Jenkinson are 20 yards to your left when it lands. Hargreaves loses 2 fingers on his left hand and most of his hearing in his right ear. Jenkinson is unconscious for 6 minutes, which is 6 minutes of absolute terror for everyone in the section, and then comes around with a concussion and is stretchered back down the communication trench to the aid post. You're close enough that you feel the pressure and go down instinctively and come back up with mud on your face and chalk in your mouth and a ringing in your ears that takes 3 hours to fully clear. Close enough. Not close enough. Ned is at the other end of the section, 60 yards away, and you don't know this for 12 minutes. 12 minutes in which you do your job, which is checking on the men nearest to you, helping get Hargreaves's hand bandaged with the field dressing he keeps in the breast pocket of his jacket, keeping Mallory flat while the area might still be targeted, all of the correct mechanical actions of aftermath. You do them correctly and efficiently, and the whole time there is a part of your brain that is counting the 60 yards and the 12 minutes with a terrible precision, and then you round the Traverse Bend and Ned is there, at his fire step, chalked white from debris like a ghost but whole, looking at you with an expression that you read instantly, and that he reads back from your face in the same instant. Neither of you says anything. There's nothing to say that isn't in the 12 minutes and the 60 yards. You take your position. He takes his. Stand to is in 20 minutes. That evening, in the dugout, after the section has been reorganised to cover the gaps left by Hargreaves and Jenkinson's absence, Finch gives a brief address that is not called an address but functions as one, which consists of him saying that both men will recover, that the section will operate with 6 men until replacements arrive, and that the section will operate as well with 6 as it did with 8, because it's the same people. He says this last part with the quiet certainty that makes it true. You sleep badly that night. When you close your eyes, you see Hargreaves's hand, the neat professional fact of it, the way the body can be subtracted from like that. You're used to the math of the front, but something about the specificity of 2 fingers on a left hand undoes you in a way that larger subtractions haven't. You are lying in the lower bunk. Above you, Ned is awake. You know this by his breathing, which you know in the same way you know your own breathing. The candle is out. The brazier has died down. "Tom?" "I know," you say. "I kept..." He stops. I counted the distance. I know. Every second of it. Yes. A silence. The guns are quiet tonight, an almost indecent quiet, as if the war is resting. From somewhere in the village, 3 miles back, very faint, a bell. Come down, you say. He comes down. He's careful about it and silent, and in the dark he is just a weight and a warmth and a presence that settles beside you, and then goes still, and the warmth of him is the most real thing in the room. You're not safe, here in the dugout, in the middle of the night with 3 other men sleeping 10 feet away. You know this. He knows this. You're both running the calculation constantly, the calculation that never fully stops, the exact accounting of what is visible and what is not. A man sleeping beside another man for warmth, normal, expected. The cold is such that Finch himself has indicated there's no rule against it. 2 men together in the dark. This is the whole world right now. This is the front. This is what men do. But what you feel is not casual. What you feel is the specific gravity of a person who might not have been here, who might have been 60 yards from a shell that was 20 yards closer, who is here, is alive and warm and present at your left side, with his breathing slowing into something that is closer to sleep than it was. You put your hand on his chest, just your hand over his heartbeat, through his jacket, through the layers of cloth and necessary distance that are always between you. You feel it, the beat of it, steady and strong and his. He puts his hand over yours. You lie there in the dark and neither of you speaks, and both of you eventually sleep. You get through Christmas. Christmas at the front is a strange institution. Rum ration doubled. A food parcel from home that your mother has sent with the particular intense practicality that mothers apply to inadequate situations. Dried fruit, a tin of biscuits, a new pair of socks that are so perfectly ordinary they make your throat close for a moment when you open the package. There is a carol service in a barn near the billet that Finch attends with the other NCOs, and that you and Ned slip out of early, citing the need to check the stores, which Finch hears and says nothing about. There is no miracle truce this year, the way there was in 1914. That particular extraordinary thing has not recurred, has been officially discouraged, has been made clear to be not the nature of this war. This war has settled into itself. It is 2 years old now, and it knows what it is. What you know is that the war continues, and you are in it, and Ned is in it beside you, and the calculus of survival applies equally to both of you, and cannot be applied favourably to either one specifically. You have started to understand in these weeks the specific cruelty of this particular situation, which is that the war has given you each other, and is equally likely to take you from each other, and it will make no distinction based on anything you feel. The shell that landed near Hargreaves and Jenkinson did not know who was 60 yards away and who cared about that person. It did not consider this information relevant. This is not a realization that makes anything easier. It just makes it more exactly true. You are careful. You are always careful. But in January, something happens. It is not something dramatic. It is, in the ledger of wartime incidents, a small thing. The officer in charge of the company, Lieutenant Graves, 24 years old, from Surrey, decent enough in the mechanical way that most junior officers are decent, calls Ned in for what is described as a routine interview regarding the section's efficiency reports. Ned comes back from this interview with a particular expression that you have learned to read the way you read the sound of incoming shells, as information about threat. He tells you, later, in the language of no language, in the grammar of very carefully placed words in an ordinary conversation about the store's inventory, that Lieutenant Graves made a comment about the two of you. The comment was phrased as friendly observation. The phrasing was, "You and Whitfield seem well matched," said with a smile. Said as nothing, said as a compliment even. But the way Graves watched Ned as he said it, the specific quality of the watching, you absorb this information the same way you absorb all information about danger, completely, immediately, without drama. You file it. You adjust. The adjustment is this. You become, in the visible world, slightly more separate. Not drastically. A dramatic change would itself be suspicious, a guilty-looking readjustment of behaviour that would create exactly the question you are trying to avoid, but slightly. The store's runs become, for a few weeks, runs that you do separately. The proximity on the fire step calibrates itself back a fraction of a degree. You are still the two men who work well together, and are often paired by Finch. You are just marginally more two separate men who happen to often be near each other, rather than two men who seek each other out. This costs. It costs considerably. You have become accustomed, in a way you didn't realize how accustomed until it's reduced, to the specific comfort of his nearness. Not even touch. You're rarely touching, even in the private register, but proximity. The knowledge of where he is. The peripheral vision of him on the fire step. The sound of his voice from the other end of the dugout. Its reduction creates a specific cold that the November mud didn't. A cold that is interior and has nothing to do with the temperature. He feels it too. You know this without it being said. The grammar between you is fluent enough now that absence has a texture. You wait. You're careful. Lieutenant Graves goes on leave for a week and comes back apparently having forgotten whatever thought he had, or having decided it was worth more to him to not think it than to think it, which is how most people handle most things that require courage to examine. The separation recedes slightly. The proximity recalibrates. Not all the way back. You carry the knowledge of that moment the way you carry the knowledge of the sniper at the northeast parapet bend, as standing information, as a thing that has happened once and could happen again. March. The cold is still present, but beginning to consider retreat. The mud is slightly different mud, thinner, more willing to move, less committed to keeping everything it touches. There are days when the sky above the parapet is actually blue, a thin, washed blue, the blue of early spring that has not yet decided to be warm, but blue. Ned is sick, not wounded, sick. A fever that starts at the end of February and by the first week of March has become high enough that even Finch, who is not given to medical alarm, takes him to the aid post. The medical officer there is a tired man from Edinburgh named Dr. McAllister, who has been on the Western Front for 19 months, and whose opinion of the human capacity for self-destruction has been considerably revised downward by the experience. He listens to Ned's chest and looks at his throat and takes his temperature and writes something in a notebook and says, bronchitis, possibly developing toward pneumonia, bed rest required, to be moved to the casualty clearing station. Possibly further if it worsens. Further means England. Blighty. The word for home that the soldiers have made their own. You know about this before Ned tells you. Finch tells you, matter-of-factly, the way Finch tells you everything. Carver's going back. Fever. McAllister thinks his lungs are involved. You're measuring wire for a repair. You finish the measurement. You cut the wire. You say, right. When? Tomorrow, the ration cart going back. Right, you say again. The wire is exactly the right length. You've been getting precise at this. That evening, the last evening, though you don't know yet if it's the last evening, if the lungs will be bad enough for England, or if the clearing station will fix him and send him back in 2 weeks. That evening Ned is in the dugout, not on duty because Finch has taken him off rotation, lying on his bunk with the particular flat stillness of a high fever, eyes open, face damp. You bring him tea. The tea from the ration is not good tea, is never good tea, but it is hot and it is there and it is the thing available to bring. He looks at the tea, looks at you. "Thank you," he says. His voice has the rasp of the chest infection in it, a roughness that isn't his voice, that is an imposition on his voice. You dislike it intensely in the way you dislike anything that is occupying space that should be his. "How are you feeling?" And you know this is an ordinary question, the question anyone would ask, but the way you ask it is not ordinary, and he knows this. "Not wonderful," he says, which is his version of quite bad. McAllister says, I know what McAllister says. He pauses. The breath at the end of it is slightly uneven. "I may go to England." "I know." "Tom, I know." A silence. The brazier. The candle. Keeley somewhere at the other end of the dugout dealing with his kit, audible but not visible around the bend of the canvas partition. "I'll write," Ned says, and this carries what it carries, in the grammar of a mission. He will write to you, and the letters will be normal letters, appropriate letters, nothing that Finch or any other censor will see as anything other than one soldier writing to a fellow soldier, but there will be a register within them, a frequency in the choice of words, a thing underneath that will be legible to you the way the cap adjustment and the comment about evening air are legible, a language within the language that belongs to both of you. Yes, you say. You want to say, "Don't die." You want to say, "I have been careful for 5 months and it is very hard, and the hardness of it is equal to the value of what it protects, and what it protects is you and I would like you to still be alive when we are on the other side of this war, if there is an other side of this war, which I currently choose to believe there is." You want to say you are not alone. What you say is, "Get some rest. You'll need it for the journey tomorrow." "Yes," he says. He closes his eyes. The fever makes his colour wrong, a flush over the cheekbones that doesn't belong to him, and the sound of his breathing is too loud for the normal quiet of the dugout. You sit for a while on the ammunition box and you watch him breathe, not touching, not speaking, just there, in the light of the brazier, while the front does its business outside and the night comes down and the section moves round the dugout in its ordinary evening rhythms. He sleeps. The breathing gradually evens out, not fully, still the rasp in it, but less terrible. You go to your bunk eventually. You do not sleep for a long time. In the morning, the ration cart going back takes 3 men with minor wounds and 1 man with bronchitis in his lungs, and you watch the cart go from the supply access point with Finch and Mallory and Keeley, and Ned is on it with his kit beside him, and his face pale in the grey morning light, and he does not look back, and you do not call after him, and that is the right way to do it, the correct and careful way. And it is also the most complete absence of warmth you have experienced since you arrived in France. You turn around and go back to the trench. The section with Ned in it is the section you know. The section without Ned in it is a different geography. You navigate it. You do your work. You maintain the wire and repair the revetting, and stand at the fire step at dawn and dusk, and do all of the things that need to be done, and you do them correctly, and Finch notices nothing amiss in your performance. Because your performance is unchanged. What is changed is interior. What is changed is the specific diminishment of a person who has been your north. Not that you are navigating by him consciously. Not that you can point to the specific decisions you have made differently because of his presence. But there is a quality to the days that is reduced, and you notice it the way you'd notice a lamp turned down. Not dark, just less. You get his letters. They come through the field post, through the same system that brings everything, the rum and the rations and the wire and the whale oil, and they arrive every 10 days or so, bundled with the other mail in the corporal's hand. Finch gives you yours across the counter of the stores and says nothing, and you take them to your bunk and read them there. On the surface, they are exactly what they're supposed to be. A man writing to his section colleague from a base hospital in northern France, then from a convalescent home in Lincolnshire, then from his family's house in Lincoln. He is recovering. The lungs are improving. McAllister was right to send him back. The infection, in the right conditions, could have turned much worse. He describes the hospital, the convalescent home, his mother's cooking. He describes Lincoln in early spring, the cathedral visible from the house, the fields beginning to show green. These are the words. These are what Finch reads when he reads them, and sees nothing in because there is nothing to see. And then there is the other register. The other register is this: the particular quality of attention in a sentence that is 3 times as long as it needs to be. The specific word choice. That is not the natural word choice, but the considered word choice, the word that is also another word. The mentions of things only you would understand as significant. A reference to the correct length of wire. A comment about the accuracy of periscopes. A single line about a wood pigeon he heard in the garden. The wood pigeon. The wood pigeon in the field that evening on the road, when the distance between you closed for the first time. He put the wood pigeon in a letter to you about the convalescent home's garden. And Finch read this letter and saw a man recovering from bronchitis who heard a bird, and you read this letter and held it for a long time on your bunk in the dugout with the guns going in the distance and the smell of chalk and mud all around you, and the absence of him exactly the shape of him. You write back. Every week. You write back in the same register, the same 2-level language, the surface and the frequency beneath it. You tell him about the wire repairs. You tell him about the rats, including the specific bold rat, which is still present, still working the section with its dark eyes and its professional confidence. You tell him about the sky, about the particular quality of a light in early spring above the parapet, about the poplars down the road from the billet that you've started walking past on rest evenings on your own. In the 5th letter you mention, in passing, a road outside a village, the one that runs between fields, the poplars, the evening star above them. He replies that he remembers a road like that roads like that are worth remembering, that he intends to walk on a road like that again, when circumstances permit. When circumstances permit. You are the most careful you have ever been. You are also the most certain you have ever been, which is its own kind of courage, in a place that requires a different kind from you every day. He comes back in April. April on the Western Front is a lie. April looks like spring. The fields around the billets are actually producing things. Crops, green and impossible looking against the grey sky, and the trees along the roads are budding, and the birds have returned to make their completely unreasonable sounds over the wire. April looks like the world is renewing itself, which is what April always looks like, and which is, this year, in this place, a remarkable piece of impudence on the part of the season. You're on a supply run when you come back to find him in the dugout. You walk through the entrance with a coil of wire over your shoulder and find him sitting on his ammunition box. His ammunition box still there. Nobody has claimed it, either by accident or by some wordless consensus in the section that it was his, with his kit beside him and his cap pushed back and the long, familiar line of him, looking up when you come in, and the expression on his face is the expression that you have been carrying in your head for 6 weeks, and which is now present in the room. You put the wire down. You don't say anything for a moment. You came back, you say. I said I would, he says. You look better. I feel better. He does look better. The fever colour is gone. The roughness in his voice is gone. He looks like himself, which is what you've been waiting for him to look like for 6 weeks. The bold rat, you say, has claimed your ammunition box twice since you've been gone. I've been keeping him off it. Thank you, he says, and the quality in his voice when he says it, the two-level quality, the thing underneath the ordinary words, is the same quality it's always had, unchanged by 6 weeks of absence, present and exact. Right, you say. Come on, Finch will want to see you. You go out together into the trench, into the ordinary business of the afternoon, the guns and the mud and the work that never ends, and he walks beside you in the narrow corridor of the communication trench the way he always has, slightly behind you around the corners, his boots in the mud with the familiar sound. You are not alone. He is back. Evening in the trench comes earlier than evening in the field because the walls cut the light before the sky is actually darkened. By 5 o'clock in April, the trench is already in shadow. The sky above it still pale and clear, but the trench itself dim and smelling of itself, which is to say smelling of everything. Stand to passes without event. The grey land of no man's land gives nothing up at dusk as it rarely does. Stand down. Tea. The section moves into the routine of the evening with the particular efficiency of men who've been doing the same things together long enough that they no longer need to discuss the order. Ned takes his place in the dugout at his ammunition box with his notebook. He writes. You can see, from the angle of the candle, the slight concentration at the corner of his eyes that means he is thinking carefully before committing anything to the page. Keeley is playing cards with Mallory. The new replacements, 2 men from a Midlands regiment, both quiet and keeping themselves slightly apart the way new men always do until the section absorbs them, are in their bunks. Finch is doing paperwork at the door end of the dugout, which he does most evenings, the administrative record of existence at the front. It is quiet as the front gets. After a while, Ned puts the notebook down and looks at the brazier, and you look at the brazier, and the brazier does what braziers do, which is glow and occasionally shift and pop. The bold rat, Ned says quietly. Does he still? Still comes at 4:30. Still sits up straight. Still hasn't decided we're worth chasing off. Seemingly not. I think he's decided we're furniture. A pause. Keeley makes a sound of satisfaction over his cards. Outside, the guns have started their evening murmur. I thought about the rat while I was away, Ned says. Among other things, but the rat specifically. What about him? Whether he'd still be there. Whether he'd managed. He'd managed, you say? He's a very competent rat. Something in Ned's face in the candlelight that is very nearly a smile, which for him counts as a declaration. The evening settles round the two of you, around the whole section. The particular intimacy of shared space and shared risk. The warmth that men generate together in a cold place when they have been through enough together that the warmth is real and not performed. You are exactly where you are, in a dugout in the Western Front in April 1917, 6 men in a room the size of a large wardrobe, with rats in the walls and guns in the distance and the mud smell of France in every breath. And you are also, simultaneously, in the only place you want to be, which is wherever he is. Both of these things are true at the same time. Later that night, after the section sleeps, you wake at some hour in the grey black of the deep night to a hand finding yours in the dark. His hand, the hand you know, the shape of it, the temperature of it, slightly cooler than yours always, the specific architecture of fingers you have memorized in darkness. You close your fingers around it. Outside, the guns, the distant war, doing its business. In here, two men in the dark holding on. You hold on. The spring passes into summer. Summer on the Western Front is its own category of wrongness, because summer means warmth, which means the smell compounds itself beyond what winter has managed. The cold at least suppresses. Summer unburies everything the cold has been keeping down, and the smell of the front in June is something that you have genuinely no way to prepare for, even having lived through the winter, even having absorbed as you have the general olfactory reality of the place. Summer makes new points in the range of the scale. You breathe through your mouth most days, which becomes automatic, which your body simply adapts to the way your body has adapted to everything the front has asked of it. Summer also brings the June assault. You don't know the name of it while it's happening. Names get given afterward, in dispatches and history books and the papers. While it's happening, it is simply, the orders come down, the section moves to the attack positions, the artillery preparation begins 48 hours before, and the guns that have been the constant background weather of your life become something else entirely. Something that shakes the ground under your feet and fills the air with so much noise that speech becomes impossible and even thought becomes difficult. The physical pressure of sound overriding the brain's more delicate operations. The assault itself. You go over the top. This is a phrase that the newspapers use as if it is a phrase, as if it describes a thing that can be described with words. You go over the top. At 0 hour on the signal, every man in the section climbs out of the trench that has been your entire world for 8 months, the trench that you know the way you know your own hands, and goes into no man's land, which you've been in before only on your belly in the dark, and runs toward the German wire. The sound, this sound of it is something for which there is no adequate word in any language you possess. Your own artillery is still going, the shells passing overhead so thick that the air itself seems occupied, and the German artillery is responding, and in the space between those two systems of noise you are running, and the ground is the ground, which is to say it is no man's land, which is to say it is the most destroyed earth on the continent, and running across it is like running across a nightmare version of a field, full of craters and wire and things you step over or around without looking. Ned is to your left. You know this because you established your positions in the trench before 0 hour. You, Mallory, Carver, Keeley in the line, and you have not lost sight of him in the opening minutes. You have not lost sight of him. This is the thing you are keeping. All of the other calculations as direction, speed, obstacle, the specific sounds that mean get down, get flat, get moving, all of those are happening in the part of your brain that has become military after 8 months of training it. The other part, the part that is Tom Whitfield from Yorkshire who's in love with a man from Lincoln, that part is keeping one thing. To his left. Ned is to your left. You lose him at the second line of German wire. A shell lands between you, not close enough to kill, far enough that close is the operative word. and the debris and the pressure and the instinctive movement away from it means that when you look left, he is not there. 20 seconds. The attack is still moving around you, men running, officers shouting direction, the air thick with everything. 20 seconds in which you are running in the correct direction, and also doing the calculation, the terrible math of where he could have gone, which directions are possible, and then, to your right, appearing around a section of destroyed wire, his tin hat on the wrong angle from the pressure of the blast, chalk white again from the debris, but moving. Moving at the right pace. The pace of a man who is not yet hurt. You recalibrate. Left, right, it's all the same. He's there. You reach the German first trench together. The fighting in it is the close, ugly business that close fighting always is, and you do what you are trained to do, and you do not think about anything except what is directly in front of you. And afterward, when it is afterward, when the section has achieved its objective and the counter-attack has been held and the new position is being consolidated, afterward you find each other in the captured trench. His jacket is torn at the shoulder. Not blood. The tear is mechanical. Something sharp caught it. Wire, probably. His face is... It is his face, and it is the most reliably real thing in the world right now. And you stand in a German trench and you look at each other. "All right," you say. "Yes," he says. His voice is steady. His hands are not shaking, which surprises you slightly because yours are. "Shoulder. Wire. It's fine. You. Fine." Finch comes through with a consolidation order and the two of you separate to your positions, and the work of holding the new ground begins, which is the same work as holding the old ground, repeated in a new location, the eternal recurrence of the Western Front. But you stood in a German trench and looked at each other, and both of you were there. Both of you were there. Keely is carrying a slight wound in the thigh, a fragment, not deep, dressed by the medic and kept with the section because it doesn't meet the threshold for evacuation. Mallory is unhurt. Two of the Midlands replacements are carried back. You hold the new position through the night. At some point in that long night, a night that is the specific quality of post-battle night, in which the normal sounds of the front are present but felt differently, with a different layer of meaning. Ned finds you on the fire step of the captured trench. He doesn't say anything. He stands beside you, and you stand beside him, and the German no-man's land is in front of you, and the Allied no-man's land is behind you, and you're in the reversal of everything you've known for 8 months. "We held," he says eventually. "We held. Tom..." And in his voice, in the two sounds of your name, is the entire night. The 20 seconds at the wire. The chalk-white face appearing from the right when you'd been looking left. The hands that are steady when yours are not. He puts it all in your name, and you hear it all there completely, and you say nothing for a moment because you are attempting to be precise about what you say next. "I know," you say finally. "I know exactly." The night continues. The guns continue. The summer sky above the trench, gradually lightening toward a dawn that is early at this latitude in June, turns from black to deep blue to the first grey. You stand there together, and the sky gets lighter, and you don't move. This is not nothing. In a war that is taking men out of the world in thousands, in an army that makes the love you carry into a criminal offence, standing on a fire step beside the person who is your north, and watching the sky get lighter. This is not nothing. This is the resistance. This is the thing that the apparatus of destruction and law and social prohibition cannot reach, because it is interior, because it happens between two people in the private register of their own language, because it leaves no evidence in any document. The bodies of men are being counted and managed and destroyed by the thousands across 400 miles of the Western Front. But what passes between two people standing on a fire step in the grey light of a captured German trench, that is not in any record. That is theirs. You hold the new position for 3 days. On the 4th day, the section rotates back to reserve and then to rest. 4 days out of the line. The same barn, the same straw, the same mud that is not front mud, the same smell of an old farm that has not been destroyed. The second evening of rest, you take the left road. He follows 5 minutes later, the road between the fields, the poplars at the edge, now in full leaf, dark green and moving in the warm evening air. The sky still pale at 9 o'clock, the long summer twilight of northern France, the evening star not yet visible. You stand at the side of the road in the shadow of the trees, and he comes around the bend and stops when he sees you, and stands there for a moment looking at you. And the distance between you closes. This time there is no calculation of visibility, no running assessment of who might come around the next bend. This time there is the road and the trees and the quiet of an evening that is not the front, and his hands on your face the way they were last summer, and his forehead against yours, and the extraordinary ordinary fact of being two people who have found each other in the least hospitable landscape imaginable and held on. You didn't die, you say, into the small space between you. No, he agrees. I require you to continue not dying. I'll do my best. Your best is not sufficient. I require certainty. He pulls back enough to look at you properly, which is what he does when something is important enough to look at. His eyes in the last light of the evening. The colour you still can't quite name. Green-brown, something else. The light doing things to it. Tom, he says, quietly, absolutely. I know, you say. The evening star appears above the poplars. 1 star, then 2, then the sky beginning to fill. You stand together in the road for a long time, in the summer warmth of a France that is 3 miles from the front and could be a different world. And nobody comes around either bend, and the evening holds you both, and this is real. This is as real as the mud and the shells and the wire. This is as real as anything that is happening on the Western Front tonight, or any night. This is also what the history books will not record. The war doesn't end this summer. It doesn't end in the autumn either. The offensive bogs down in the mud of Passchendaele and the casualty counts come in, and the newspapers report heroic advances of 400 yards that cost 10,000 men. And at home there are people who are tired of the war, and people who are still proud of the war, and the machinery of it continues regardless of what anyone thinks about it. In the section, in the months that follow, you develop the particular fluency that long survival creates. You have been at the front for over a year. You know things that cannot be taught. The exact sound of a shell that will hit your section of trench versus a section 50 yards down. The specific smell that means gas even before the alarm goes. The way the ground transmits information through the soles of your boots before the sound reaches your ears. You also know each other in ways that have become simply the fact of you. Ned knows that you sleep on your right side, and that you drink your tea before it's finished the temperature it should be, and that you are better with a rifle than with any other task the army gives you. You know that he writes in his notebook every evening, and that he talks less than usual when something is bothering him, and that his instinct when things go wrong is to move toward the problem rather than away from it. A quality that in the army is called courage, and in the daily life of the section is called Ned. The language between you is fully developed now. It requires almost no visible performance. You have learned to conduct it so completely within the surface behaviour that they are inseparable to any outside observation. You're simply two men who work well together, who've been together since the autumn of 1916, who are the kind of unit the army wants its sections to produce. Within that unit, everything else, the whole interior country, there are others in the company. You have found this out gradually, the way you find out most things about the world of which you are a part, obliquely, through inference, through the accumulation of small observations that eventually add up to a fact. The two officers whose voices you heard through the door in the first month. A private in B Company named Frost, who has a particular way of standing when he's talking to the sergeant major from D Company. A particular quality of attention that you recognise the way you recognise a frequency in a voice. A medical orderly at the aid station who has the look of someone who is carrying what you carry. The exact calibration of visibility. You do not speak to any of them about it. This is not paranoia. This is the rule of the structure. The structure of hiding is not built on community, on recognition and acknowledgement. It is built on isolation. Each person holds their own, does not reach sideways to claim kinship with others, does not create a visible group that could be identified as such. The safety of the structure depends on each component of it being invisible, but there is something in the knowing, something that makes the loneliness of it, the persistent loneliness of carrying something that cannot be spoken in the surface language, slightly less. You're not the only one. In this war, which is killing men in unprecedented quantities, among the men who are dying are men who are what you are. Men who have loved other men. Men who have carried what you carry through the same mud, toward the same wire, into the same dark. This is both terrible and somehow a comfort. The comfort of not being singular. The comfort of knowing that the thing you are is a thing that has always been in every war, in every army, in every time. That it is not new. That it is not you specifically. That you are not the last. The letters continue. Even now when you're in the same section, you sometimes write. This seems unnecessary from the outside. Why write to a man sleeping 10 feet from you? But the writing does what words in the body of the day cannot. It gives things a shape. It makes them exist in a form that is slightly more permanent than the passing moment, even if the permanence is fragile, even if the paper gets burned in the brazier or torn into pieces small enough not to read. You write to him about Yorkshire, about the specific light on the moors in early autumn, which you've been trying to describe accurately for months and getting closer but not quite there. You write about your father's hardware shop, which you've never described to anyone in detail because it seemed too ordinary to describe. But in the context of the front, the ordinariness of it, the bins of nails sorted by size, the smell of oil and steel, the weight of a properly made hammer, becomes worth describing. Worth preserving in words. He writes to you about his grandfather's farm, about the mornings in the fields, the grain between his fingers. He writes about the mathematics he was studying at Oxford, which he describes in terms that are accessible to someone who did not study mathematics, with the patience of someone who knows that the subject matters even to people who don't fully follow it. He writes about Lincoln Cathedral, visible from the family house, rising above the medieval city in a way that makes the city seem like it was built in service of the cathedral, which it was. These letters are not love letters. If Finch reads them, and Finch does read them as he reads everything because that's the system, Finch reads ordinary letters between soldiers who have become friends, accounts of things outside the front, The kind of letter any two men might exchange if they were the kind of men who wrote. They are also love letters, in the frequency beneath the surface, in the selection of detail and the attention within it, and the quality of care that goes into the choosing of every word. They are the most honest things either of you has written. They exist in the two-level language fully and permanently, and they say exactly what they mean in both registers simultaneously. This is what love is, you have come to think, in the place where love has to be careful, not the declarations, not the visible architecture of romance that the world stages for people who are allowed to have it in public. Something more durable, the choice, every day, in conditions that are actively hostile to the choice, to keep choosing. The maintenance of a private country inside the public war. The grammar built from nothing, from the necessity of a mission that turns out to be capable of saying everything. August becomes September, becomes October, becomes the second winter. The second winter is easier than the first, not because it's less cold, it isn't. Not because the mud improves, it doesn't. But because you know it now. You know the specific cold of the Western Front in November, and you have been through it and come out the other side, which means the brain, which is doing its constant work of calibrating threat, has already filed this particular threat under manageable, known, survivable. The rat is still there. Both of you find this disproportionately reassuring. He is slower in the cold and fatter than he was in summer, and sits on the fire step with the particular immovability of a creature that has assessed its options and found this one most favourable. I respect him, Ned says on an October evening, looking at the rat which is looking back at him. He respects you too, you say. He's been on your ammunition box twice today. High praise. The rat, apparently satisfied with the direction of the conversation, turns its back on you both and goes about its business. The winter passes. The second spring arrives, with its impudent green and its birds and its smell of something alive below the chalk and the mud smell. Something pushing upward, something that doesn't know about the war. The section has been together, you and Ned, Keeley, Mallory, for a year and a half by March 1918. This is a long time. This is a long enough time that when men are added to the section, they're absorbed into something that has an existing culture, a set of shared references, a particular way of doing things that the section calls simply the way we do things here, which is what any culture calls its rules. What the section doesn't know, what nobody in the section knows, what nobody knows except the two of you, is that within the ordinary culture there is a private culture. That for every hour of the section's shared life there has been a parallel private archive, a set of moments and exchanges and long careful letters that exist in a frequency nobody around you has ever tuned to. You don't think much anymore about what you are. The examining what you are that occupied the early months, the effort to locate yourself on any map the world had made available, has given way to the simple fact of it. You are Tom Whitfield from Yorkshire. You love Ned Carver from Lincoln. Both of these things are entirely true, and one of them is criminal, and neither of them is going to change. You are careful. You will always be careful. The caution is permanent, is written into you at a level below habit, below thought. But the carrying of it has become part of the ordinary work of the day, like the carrying of kit, like the maintenance of the wire. You have learned the weight of it and adjusted. In March 1918, the Germans launched the spring offensive, the Kaiserschlacht, the Kaiser's battle. It is the largest German offensive since 1914, and it moves the line. actually moves it, which has not happened in 3 years, and the weeks that follow are the most dangerous weeks you have been through, including the assault in June. The section moves constantly, falling back and consolidating and moving again, and the front is everywhere and nowhere, and the administrative certainties, the fire step, the communication trench, the stores at C Company, the barn 3 miles back, all of those dissolve into a kind of fluid emergency that has no fixed geography. In this emergency, you do not have the structure of the trench to move within. You have your rifle and your section and the person beside you. Ned is beside you. Through all of it. Through the retreat and the consolidation and the confused fight in an open country that the Western Front has not, until now, produced in your experience. Through the nights in shell craters and abandoned buildings, and once, memorably, in a French barn that had a horse still in it, an old grey horse that regarded all 8 of you with magnificent unconcern while the guns went and the spring rain came down. The horse doesn't care, Keeley says, looking at the horse. The horse has survived this long, Ned says. The horse knows something we don't. The horse knows we'll leave in the morning, you say. The horse, at this, turns its enormous head toward you with an expression of agreement that is probably anthropomorphism, but is very convincing. Through all of it, you hold. The section holds. The line eventually holds. The spring offensive runs out of momentum in late April and early May. The Allied response begins to build. Something has shifted. You feel it in the intelligence that comes down through the section, in the different quality of the orders, in the particular energy in the officers' faces when they come back from battalion meetings. Something is different. Something is perhaps moving toward a conclusion. You don't let yourself believe this fully. You have been at the front for long enough to have been through cycles of optimism and reversal, and you have learned to hold hope lightly, to not invest too much in it. Hope is expensive on the Western Front. It costs more when it fails than it gives when it holds. But something is different. The summer of 1918 moves differently from the summers before it. There is momentum in it that the previous summers didn't have. The offensives that the Allies launch in August move the line in a direction it hasn't moved in 4 years, and the movement keeps going, and for the first time since you arrived, you begin to have the following thought: this might end. This thought is terrifying, more terrifying than you expected, because an ending means a return to everything the war has held at bay, everything the war has accidentally provided cover for. It means the civilian world, where the law has opinions, where visibility means exposure, where the language you and Ned have built will not be the native language of the context around you. You lie on your ground sheet in October and think about this. The war ending means going home. Going home means Skipton, your father's hardware shop, your mother's kitchen, a world in which 2 men who are what you are have precisely 0 social vocabulary to contain what they are. Going home means Ned going to Lincoln, you going to Yorkshire, the specific geography of England separating you by something that is not no man's land but functions as it. The 140 yards of the Western Front compressed into the invisible but absolute distance of the civilian world, where there is no administrative reason for the 2 of you to be in the same place. You think about this until the thinking becomes something you need to put down. Ned, you say, in the dark of the dugout in October 1918. I've been thinking about it too, he says. Of course he has. He has probably been thinking about it more precisely than you have, because precision is how he thinks. What do we do, you ask? And this is the most vulnerable question you have asked him, because all the other questions have been about the war, about immediate and manageable dangers, about the next 48 hours. This question is about the rest of your lives. He is quiet for a long time, the particular thinking quiet. My father's firm, he says. There are offices in the West Riding, a branch in Leeds. You hear what he is saying. And you could come to Lincoln, he says, to study, the university or the firm itself. My father has been looking for. He pauses. It isn't complicated, Tom. It just requires decisions, and those decisions require surviving until the decisions can be made. And then we make them. It is the most provisional plan you've ever heard. It is built on the assumption of a future and the willingness to work toward it with the same careful economy that has gotten you through everything else. It is not a declaration. It is not a promise. It is simply, I intend to be on the other side of this, and I intend for you to be there too, and if both of those things happen, then we'll build what we can build. This is enough. This is, in the vocabulary available to you, everything. All right, you say. All right, he agrees. The guns continue outside. October 1918 and the guns continue, but there is a future on the other side of them, provisional and careful and real. The war ends on November 11th. You are in a field in Belgium when it ends, with the section doing what the section does, which is maintaining a position. The message comes through the communication chain and reaches Finch, who reads it, and there is a moment, a very specific, very strange moment, in which the message is in Finch's hands and not yet in the world, and then it is in the world, and the guns stop. The guns stop. The silence is the most complete silence you have ever heard. After 26 months of the guns, the silence is a physical presence, an event, a thing that happens to you as surely as any shell. Your ears don't know what to do with it. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. Arthur Keeley starts crying. He doesn't make a show of it. He just sits down on the ground and puts his face in his hands and his shoulders shake, and nobody says anything because there is nothing to say, and after a few minutes he stands back up and wipes his face and nods at Finch, and that's all. Ned is standing 4 feet to your left, in the field, in Belgium, in the silence. You look at each other. You don't say anything. The section is all around you, and this is still, this will always be, a world in which you are careful, in which visibility has consequences, in which the language you speak must be the surface language for all public purposes. But in this moment, in the silence after the guns, you look at each other across the 4 feet, and everything that is in you is visible, and everything that is in him is visible, and neither of you looks away for a long moment. Then Finch says something about the next orders, and the section starts moving, and the world begins again. The new world, the after-war world, and you are in it. Both of you, and that was the thing that was required. You made it. Both of you. You made it. The demobilization takes months. The army does not dissolve quickly or gracefully. It is a large institution, and it has opinions about orderly process, and the orderly process of releasing 1 million men back into civilian life takes the better part of a year. You're in France until February. You're at a transit camp in England until March. You write letters. You both do. Not the 2-level letters of the front, not the careful encoded grammar of the trench, just letters. You write to each other in a register that is still careful, because the caution doesn't disappear the day the guns stop. But that is fuller than the front allowed. You're in different camps, in different parts of England, and the letters are the only thread. He writes, I have been to visit the cathedral. It looks the same. Everything looks the same and I look different. You write, the moors look the same too. I walked on them yesterday for the first time in 2 years and they did not care. He writes, that is the correct behaviour of moors. In March he is demobilised. In April you are. You go home to Skipton. Your mother opens the door and holds you for a long time without saying anything, which is not like her. She's a practical woman. Your mother, not given to silence. And you understand that the holding is everything she's been thinking about for 2 years. Everything the letters couldn't contain. Your father shakes your hand and then also holds you, briefly, in the way that men of his generation hold their sons, quickly and with apparent embarrassment, and you love him for the apparent embarrassment and for the fact that he did it anyway. You eat your mother's cooking. You sleep in your own bed, in a room that hasn't changed, under a ceiling that isn't chalk and timber. You lie there and listen to the silence of the house. Not the silence of after the guns, not that terrible void, just ordinary household silence, the creak of the building, the distant sounds of the street outside, and you breathe. 2 days after you get home, a letter arrives. You know the handwriting. You've known it for 2 years. The letter says, I am in Lincoln. My father's firm has a branch in Leeds. I am to go there in May to learn the property management side of the work. Leeds is close to Skipton. I believe there is a train. You put the letter down, you pick it up again. You put it in your breast pocket, in the same place where men in the trench kept the letters they intended to keep. There is a train. There is indeed a train. You are 22 years old. The war is over. You're in the West Riding of Yorkshire, and Ned Carver is in Lincoln, and in May he is going to Leeds, and Leeds is 22 miles from Skipton, and there is a train. This is not certainty. The civilian world is not the trench, and the things the trench held in common, the danger shared, the proximity enforced, the language built in extremity, those things don't automatically translate into the world where men go home to their families and their towns and their previous lives. The civilian world has its own rules, its own watching, its own apparatus of consequence. But you are Tom Whitfield, who has been in the worst place the 20th century has so far produced, and you are alive, and he is alive, and in May there is a train to Leeds. You write back that same evening. Your letter says, I know there is a train. I've looked it up. It leaves Skipton at 9:15 in the morning and arrives in Leeds at 9:30. I would like to take it in May, and I would like very much to find you in Leeds when it arrives. I believe you will know what I mean by this. You seal the letter. You put it in the postbox on the street outside. It is Tuesday in April 1919. The sky above Skipton is the particular wash blue of an English spring, the specific colour of no other sky in the world, and the smell coming off the moors is cold and green and entirely itself. You stand at the postbox for a moment after the letter goes in. Then you go home. You have earned the walk home. You have earned the house and the kitchen and the ceiling that doesn't sweat chalk. You have earned the moors and the sky, and the silence that isn't the silence of after the guns, but just the silence of an April morning in Yorkshire, which is its own kind of permission, its own kind of peace. You have earned most particularly this, the knowledge that in May there is a train, and at the end of the train is Ned, and you're going to take it. May is still weeks away. The weeks will be ordinary weeks. The hardware shop, your father, the moors, the gradual returning of a person to a life that fits them the way clothes fit you after you've grown back into them. You have things to do, a life to build. The shape of what it will look like is not yet clear. not even to you. But you are building it, every day, with the same economy and care that built the trench language. You're building the architecture of what comes next, and at the centre of it, as sturdy and specific as a stone pier in a river, is the knowledge of the train and the man at the end of it, and the fact that you are both here to have this conversation. You go inside. Your mother is in the kitchen. The smell of it, bread, coal, the particular domestic smell that is entirely your mother's house, fills the hallway. "Tea," she calls from the kitchen. "Please," you say. You hang up your coat. You go into the kitchen, where the kettle is on, and the window looks out onto the back garden, and the garden looks the same as it always looked, unreasonably the same, patient and ordinary, and there. You sit down at the table. Your mother puts the tea in front of you. She sits down across from you. She looks at you for a moment in the particular way that mothers look at children who have come back from places they couldn't follow. "You look like yourself again," she says. "You consider this." "I think I look more like myself than I did before," you say. She looks at you for another moment. Then she nods, with the specific nod that means she has understood something that wasn't said but was said, and she goes back to the bread she was cutting. You drink your tea outside the garden, the April sky, the moors beginning somewhere past the rooftops, and in your breast pocket the knowledge of the train. That is enough for today. That is everything for today. The sounds of the house, the sound of your own breathing, the weight of the chair under you and the warmth of the cup in your hands and the smell of bread and coal and ordinary life. Let them settle. Let them settle all the way down. You've been in mud and noise and the extreme geography of extremity for so long that ordinary things have a quality now, a sharpness, a particularity that they didn't have before. The bread smell is exactly bread smell. The warmth of the cup is exactly the warmth of a cup. Nothing is abstract anymore. Nothing is to be taken for granted. This is what the war gave you, aside from everything it took. The exact value of ordinary things. Feel it. The weight of the cup. The grain of the table under your elbow. The particular sound the kettle makes as it cools. Small, specific, real. Outside, very faint. A wood pigeon somewhere in the neighbourhood. You close your eyes. The wood pigeon sound. An English garden in April. The warmth. Let it all become slow. The way sounds do when you're lying down at the end of something long. The way the body knows eventually when it is safe enough to let the vigilance down, to allow rest into the places where alertness has been living for months and years. You have earned the rest. Both of you have. All of you have. All the men in the mud. The men who carried what you carried in silence. The men who built languages no one else spoke. The men who loved each other in the worst place and held on. You held on. The room is warm. The tea is warm. The April light comes through the window and lies on the table and doesn't ask anything of you. Centuries will pass. The world you know will change past recognition. The trench on the Western Front will be grown over and memorialized and turned into a thing that people visit on Sundays with their families. The laws that made you criminal will be changed eventually after many decades, after lives lived in the same careful grammar you built in the mud, after more men than can be counted carried the same omissions in the same private country, and the same love that the world had no adequate language for. They will change. The laws will change. The language will change. The world will eventually produce a language for what you are that is not a medical term, not a legal term, not a cutting word, a language of ordinary fact, The kind of language you deserve. It will take decades. It will take more than you have. But it is coming. You can't know this in April 1919 in your mother's kitchen, but it is coming. What doesn't change is this. In every time, in every war, in every set of circumstances the world arranges to make this difficult, there are men who find each other, who build the grammar of a mission into something that says everything, who hold on, in the mud, in the silence after the guns, in the ordinary kitchens of the ordinary world. They hold on. You held on. That means something. It means something that is larger than the record, larger than the documents, larger than everything that was written down and everything that couldn't be. It means something in the category of things that are simply true, regardless of whether anyone writes them down. You loved someone through the worst of it. You were loved back. You kept each other. That's what was done. Let it be enough. Let the tea cool. Let the wood pigeon do its work outside the window. Let the table be solid under your elbows and the chair be solid under you, and the house around you be solid and warm and not moving, not shaking, not chalk and mud and water and noise. Let all of it become the slow slide toward rest. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You are here. In May there is a train, and on the other side of it, everything. But right now there is just this room, and the quiet, and the particular specific smell of bread in your mother's kitchen, and the sound of the neighbourhood outside, and the weight of the cup in your hands. Let it all slow. Let the sounds become softer. The wood pigeon and the street and the house settling, and your own breathing, all of it becoming quieter, becoming less insistent, becoming the soft background of the world that you're no longer required to be vigilant against. You've been vigilant for long enough. Rest. Let the April light lie on the table and let the afternoon come and let your eyes close and let the world go quiet. You're safe. He is alive. In May there is a train. That is enough. That is everything. Good night.